Ladies and gentlemen, I'm from Pakistan, not officially part of the axis of evil yet, but our application is being considered. Hi, how you doing? Virtual handshake, high five. Because I'm sorry, my Arabic is very shway. It's really serious. Oh, seriously. I know the emergency Arabic. وهذا الشاورما دجاج. كل شيء. شنطة hot sauce. هذا وهذا ببزي.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of BPozitive. I'm Mo Mahmoud, and today we have a very special guest, a family friend, and a well-known comedian in the world, as well as an HR representative in Saudi Aramco, the world's largest company. Now, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Rehman Akhtar.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Shall we do the COVID handshake?
I think so.
There you go. How's everything going?
Alhamdulillah, everything's going
Thank you
good.
for having me as a guest in your home.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
So I want to start with the beginning. You know, what's your background? Where did you grow up? How did it all begin? So where did that start from?
Gosh, all began many moons ago in Sialkot, Pakistan. You aware of that place?
Yes, sir.
We're everywhere in the world. We're the travelers of the world, and we're pretty much everywhere you look, you'll find a Sialkoti.
Yeah.
So that's where life started for me. Back in 1963. I almost forgot when I was born there. 1963, and in the early 60s, and wow, you've taken me back to my home where I stayed for the first 4.5 years of my life. And what an amazing time that was. I actually have recollections, physical recollections of that time of my life. A lot of people say their life is a blur before they're 5.
That's true.
But I am not like that. I do have picture memories, video memories in my mind of that time. And it was great growing up there. But I moved to UK when I was about 4.5. And I lived in London for pretty much over 30 years before coming here to Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So that's kind of my life journey up to now.
So that initial jump, firstly, like, you know, you grow up in Pakistan, you know, you have your galiyan, the small alleys, all these kind of things. So when you move to the UK, a new place, you know, you see different color of people. How did you adjust into that? You know, it might have been a roller coaster, the ups and downs. Like, how was that?
Well, my dad had gone there previously, a few years previous to that, and I'm the eldest child of 4 siblings total, right? So I have 2 brothers and a sister. And initially, depressing. It was really such a huge change. And we went in December, which is the coldest time in the UK. So I went from really nice, hot, lovely weather in Pakistan to this horrible, depressing, snowy kind of landscape in the UK. And initially, it was a bit depressing. I remember my dad used to work night shifts in those days. So daytime, we used to be in a room, and my mom and I just, used to look out the window and just cry together. It was just such an awful
Crying
time.
therapy.
It was crying therapy. We just don't know what have we done with our lives. But once I started attending school and I linked with other kids and I got busy, life became a bit easier. But initial was tough.
So what was one of your main hurdles? You know, other than like the weather, the physical attributes of the place. How did you clash with like the culture of UK? Because Pakistan and UK, especially in that time, not that I'm saying you're very old, but that
you can call me old. It's okay. Compared to you, I am.
But at that time, the racial and like cultural differences were astronomical.
Huge.
So how did you overcome that? And what?
Well, I guess the first barrier I had to overcome was the language, right? And so I spoke 0 English when I came to the UK. But luckily I picked it up very quickly. In fact, quicker than a lot of kids my age. And I was initially in a class of just Asian kids, only Indian and Pakistani kids who had 0 English. And I got thrown out of that class within about 6 weeks because I'd read all the Janet and John books which you use to learn the language. Yeah. So I progressed on to a class where I was the only brown kid in a completely white class, but I guess which must have accelerated my use of the language as well. So I had a very quick introduction to the English language, and so that I removed the first barrier very quickly. But as you say, when you move into a new culture, a new society, there's so much to get used to. And there was a lot of racial prejudice in the UK in those times, and that's something I had to confront in my own way and to deal with. And it was a bit depressing and a bit scary, to be honest. it's a very in-your-face kind of racism as
Yeah.
well, not just latent racism like you sometimes get now, and institutionalized racism. But that kind of formed a big part of my character as I was growing up, because I had to develop thick skin, develop resilience, which helped me even to this day. So yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, I can imagine, because right now in like the 20th century, you know, where like we've progressed so much that they know that racism is bad, or like they know how to put an end to it. Like there's more awareness, even though it's still evident. But I can imagine at that time it's probably just in your face. You know, oh, he's brown. What's wrong with him?
Not just in my face, man. You know, I used to get a boot down the
Oh,
back,
my.
and it really was. You could, and you did get beaten up for the color of your skin. And you know, there was one particular time where I was beaten up very, very badly, and I actually ended up in hospital. So I guess that was a little bit of a turning point for me. It was when I was 11 years old, and that kind of sticks out as a very low point in my childhood.
100%. So how were you as a child? Like, you know, how was your characteristics? You know, I could explain myself as being an absolutely irrational and crazy kid. You know, that's like simple moment as a kid. But how are you as a child, and what things would you say, other than, as you mentioned, about when you ended up in the hospital because of, you know, racial bullying? What's another, or maybe even if this is it, what's a point in your childhood that you remember that helped you, you know, become who you are? We all have that point now.
Well, how was I as a child? I have this absolute fascination and an enthusiasm for life. I was just constantly wide-mouthed at the world around me. I was constantly excited about everything, you know, maybe overexcited. Any competition that came along, I had to win it. Any, you know, schoolwork and academics, I was really into it. So I have been very enthusiastic all of my life. And one of my challenges as I've grown up is to not lose that enthusiasm, because that's what happens. When you get older, you get sort of pressures coming in, and you lose that childish enthusiasm for life. And I'm happy to say that in my kind of mid to late 50s, I still have that. And I've been able to manage to maintain that. So yeah, I would say that really defines me as a child. Anything that came along that was new, a new skill I had to learn, or you know, I loved TV. I learned a lot of my language from watching movies and British comedy, and I know we'll touch upon that probably later.
Sure.
But I had a lot of those influences. Now, I had a very strict father,
Okay.
and that I believe played a very, very big part in you know, where my life went. What that did in terms of shaping my career and my future was that literally there was this cutoff point in my evening at 6 o'clock, where, you know, now we have social media, we have so many distractions, where between 6 and around 10, which was my bedtime, I had no distractions. I had quiet thinking time and space, and I used to spend that on my homework. When I finished my homework, I thought, well, what next? And I used to research other things. I used to read about things. I was an avid reader. So that's where I developed a lot of my interests and my passions and part of my personality I have now. So I would do homework plus, if you like.
Homework plus.
yeah. So I think that shaped a lot of me. I had a lot of time to develop myself at a very early age.
And I think that's a very, very crucial and valuable thing that you had. Because now if you look at kids our age, like my, for instance, my little sister, they're 7 or 8 or whatever, and they don't have that time. They come home, they have their iPads, tablets, and they're always connected. Somehow that may be a good thing, but at the end of the day, it takes away that time that you had. And maybe, you know, to some extent I had as a kid to like develop and think about what's happening in the world, you know, and flow in our imagination, all these things. And I feel like that's a very valuable thing that you had.
I agree with you. With anything, there's good and bad.
Yeah.
What we have to do is try and get the balance. Now, I don't necessarily think that social media is a bad thing. And I use social media a lot. It connects me to the world. It allows me to get my message out there, and it allows me to learn from other people. However, you know, when's the last time you went on Instagram and you lost all track of time, and you're flicking through the posts and you're reading and you're watching IGTV videos, and suddenly you know, 5 minutes later you look up and that was 2 hours, right? Time just goes so fast. And what you've got to do is try and get some kind of balance. For example, one thing is a rule that I've recently made in my life, which I try my best to observe, is that I have a cutoff point at night when I switch off technology, I relax, and I get to sleep on time. Because one of my rules in life is getting a good minimum 7 hours sleep. That's just my time when I recharge my batteries, and I think it's great for your health. But the problem is that if you're on social media at night, and it can be midnight, it can be 1 o'clock, and I know kids suffer a lot from this. And I was getting to that point, so I had a cutoff point, 10 p.m. at night. I cut off my access to social media, and I kind of get to sleep.
Now let's move on to your career-wise. So you are an HR professional, human resources in Saudi Aramco, but then you also have your career as a comedian. So those, if you look at it, it's just on two spectrums. You got a comedian, HR professional, and the world's largest company. How did that happen? And in our age, we know and we're told that woman or any kid, you gotta focus on your tunnel vision. You're gonna have tunnel vision. This is where you want to become. You want to be a doctor. That's it. You're going to become a successful doctor. But you managed to become a successful comedian as well as a successful professional. So how did you balance those two things? How did you take them hand in hand and go together?
I want to challenge your assumption there, Mohammed.
Okay.
Right? So you said that these are on the opposite ends of the spectrum, and you're a comedian and you're an HR person. But think about it for a second. Both of those sides to my personality, my character, my career, rely upon my interest in people, right? You have to be a people watcher and an observer, interested in what makes people tick if you want to be a comedian. And to be an HR person, it's about knowing people, right? It's about wanting to help them to become better versions of themselves. So the area I work in within HR is management and professional development. So I have an interest in developing our professionals, right from entry-level graduate trainees right up to executive level. I've coached at all the levels. Now, the point I'm making here is that you bring whoever you are to work, and effectively you do take your work home with you. I know that we all strive for this work-life balance, and it's a good thing to disconnect from work, but personality-wise, you do bring a lot of yourself into your work. And that's why it's a great idea to try to work in an area of your passion, because then it stops being work, right? It's a famous expression that when someone gets a job which is their passion, they'll never work another day of their lives. And I'm very, very lucky. I consider myself so lucky, alhamdulillah, to be in that position where I'm working is a huge area of passion for me. So I go to work with a hop and a skip in my step, and I really enjoy what I do.
Like you're saying, the thing is, however, the roots are different. Like
They are.
Obviously, you mastered to balance those two and apply them and like a single workspace, which is absolutely admirable. But how did both sides begin? How did you come into comedy? How did you? And then at the same time, you're like, I'm gonna do comedy, but also I want to be a working professional. Right. So how did those roots,
Well, comedy started much earlier than the current career, obviously. Comedy started when I was 11. And I mentioned to you that there was this incident where I really got beaten up badly, and I remember sitting in hospital thinking, I can't let this carry on. I need to do something about this, right? And it was a knee-jerk reaction to you could call it a survival instinct. I needed my bullies to understand that I was more than just a punch bag, for them. So there was a local talent contest, and I decided to enter as a stand-up comedian. And in those days, one of my skills was the ability to tell a good joke in the playground. I was a good storyteller, and I thought I'd use that skill. Stood up there, kind of long story short, I did a 20-minute comedy routine in front of 300 people, and that was my first ever time, right, I performed in public, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And the judges announced the prizes. There were 6 judges, and they were announcing the prizes as always in reverse order. A third place was this person, second place was this person, and in first place we have Rehman Akhtar. And they called me Raymond in those days because Rehman is way too hard to pronounce, right? And so I got first prize, and apparently I found out that all 6 judges gave me 10 out of 10. So I got 100% score.
Wow.
So I felt, I must have done something right, and I went from, that was a huge transition point, a milestone in my life, because in one evening I went from being a victim to someone who had, conquered this project and become the number one, and I felt 10 feet tall that day. And I thought, wow, I had this real epiphany, aha moment that whatever you want to do in life, if you just take control of it, stop playing the victim, you can achieve anything you set your mind to.
So how did you get over that stage fright? Like, I'm amazed right now. You told me this the first time
Yeah.
in front of like 300 people. And how did you act in that situation? Was it like from watching TV shows? Was it watching, reading? How did you get in that environment? Because I know for a fact if an 11-year-old goes up on a stage, he's gonna be sweating. How do you get over that?
One little thing I did that perhaps helped me was that I didn't go up on the stage as Rehman Akhtar, right? Because that was the person that was the bullied kid who had these insecurities, who was not confident. I invented a character. So I put on, one of those combined masks, which is glasses, eyebrows, nose.
Yeah.
You've seen those, right? So I put one of those on, and I put my dad's work coat on, this big grey thing, and his prayer cap, the white prayer cap.
Yeah.
Right? So I invented this character called Professor Potty.
Oh my.
All right, and I hid behind him. So when I went on stage, I wasn't Rehman. And I went out and introduced myself. Hello, I'm Professor Potty. And I was able to just fit into this new character who was bold, who was brash. And I was pointing at people in the audience who, some of them, my bullies, making fun of them. And it was just a different persona. So stage fright didn't even form part of the problem. It just wasn't there, And I just managed it by hiding behind this character.
How did comedy help you otherwise? For instance, how did it craft you as a person? What has comedy given you?
First of all, I think that comedy has given me an amazing sense of connection with people, right? On a different dimension. It's given me a wonderful, being in Saudi Arabia, for example, and I was very, very fortunate to be at the beginning of the whole birth of the comedy industry here in terms of the typical English-speaking stand-up comedy side of things. And it was an amazing time to be here. And it gave me access to people and experiences that I'd never had. I was able to travel the world doing comedy.
Yeah.
I was invited to, I performed in half a dozen countries, and I've been to Kenya and back to UK to perform there, all over the Middle East and even Afghanistan. You may be aware that I got invited to perform in Kabul, Afghanistan, in the middle of the kind of very stressful period there. So if you ask me what's comedy given you, it's given me a whole different perspective to life. It's given me access to meet amazing people I never would have met, and I've met kind of heroes of mine that I used to watch on YouTube and TV, and then I got to perform with them. So that was awesome.
I've known from prior knowledge you did a show with Russell Peters. You went up there. So how was that? Because the youth love him. We know all about him and all of his brown jokes, all those kind of things. So how was that? How is he like in person? How did that go?
I was there pretty much the first time that Russell had ever performed in the UK, and we were both hired by the BBC to do a show in London. And it was an amazing experience. And I actually flew from Saudi Arabia. I'd only just arrived in Saudi for my job, and I suddenly told my boss I've got this offer from the BBC. And I was even afraid of asking her, but she said, hey, go have a ball. And so I flew from Saudi Arabia and I did this show for the BBC. And Russell's a really, really lovely guy, on and off stage. This is what you find about these comedians. Off stage, they're really terrific guys. And Russell, I've worked with Maz Jabrani, the Axis of Evil troupe that happened here in Bahrain. I got to know them, Ahmed. There's a whole host of people that I've been very privileged to share the stage with. And Russell Peters, we've done a few shows together. I met him in Bahrain, and he's a really terrific person. As I said, backstage, he remembered me from the show. We met like 10, 12 years later in Bahrain. And how many people must he have met? That says a lot about 100%. The man, So it's as I said, that's brought a very rewarding aspect to my comedy career.
So as we know, you're like a pioneer of comedy or stand-up comedy in Saudi Arabia.
In Saudi.
Before this, there was no stand-up comedy. So
much,
how did that experience arise? How did you get the idea? We need comedy here. We need something. So how did that happen? How did that begin?
The first step was that when I first arrived here, people in the community here kind of recognized me from a few appearances on TV and YouTube, and they said, hey, why don't you MC our event? And so I started becoming the host and MC of various events in the community, and then stand-up would be part of what I do. So for many years, that's all I was doing, and that was all. I would say not. I went professional after that, but one event was the turning point where I turned pro. In terms of my phone went crazy after this one event, which was the Axis of Evil comedy show in Bahrain.
Okay.
And I was one of 4 or 5 comedians chosen to open for the Axis of Evil. And if you've heard of this comedy troupe, you can Google them. But they were really big at the time, and all of them now have got individual careers. They were out of Hollywood, and so they came.
Wow.
So. And that was the biggest comedy show that Bahrain had ever had at the time, and they probably haven't had a bigger show since then either. And it was around 2,500 to 3,000 people a night for 2 nights. So we played to somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 people. For me, that was the biggest audience I'd ever played to. And so that was a turning point for me. And I thought, hang on, if we can do this in Bahrain, which is right next door to Saudi. How can we import this into Saudi and make it work here? And it was one realization that I had that helped me bring it here, was that we had to make it halal comedy, right? So we couldn't import the version that was the Western type of comedy where anything goes. You can insult people in the audience, you can use sexually explicit material, and so I knew that wouldn't work in Saudi Arabia. Now the show was called Rehman and Friends. That's the title I gave the show, and I knew that my name was on there, so my reputation was on the line, my neck was on the line, literally. So I developed a show which I produced and directed myself, which I trained the artists to say, look, we want to do cleverer stand-up comedy. And it's very easy to just be obscene material and get laughs, because it does get laughs. But wouldn't it be cleverer if we could do content which strayed away from that extreme material but was still funny? And that's the brief I gave my audience was, imagine that one of your parents and one of your siblings in the audience. Imagine your mom sitting with your brother. I don't want either of them to feel uncomfortable with your material. That's all you need to apply that rule, you're cool. And so the Rehman and Friends show was first debuted in here in Dhahran, and it was a hit from the first time. We sold out within days, and every time we did the show, like we had to put 2 nights on, so we'd get 1,000 people almost turning up to watch the show. And then companies picked up on it, and we started touring around Saudi Arabia. It became a corporate product where companies would say, listen, we're having a conference in Dubai, and on the awards night we'd like you to bring Rehman and Friends the show. And so we would provide the show, and I traveled to many other countries as a solo artist. So I would be the main event, let's say after dinner speaker with the stand-up comedy. I would host events, or we would take the Rehman and Friends comedy show. So it kind of blew up in my face. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
That's quite a journey.
It was amazing.
Mr. Rehman Akhtar, thank you so much for your time today. And ladies and gentlemen, so for today, based on our conversation, there's a couple key takeaways we can get. Firstly, laugh. It's healthy. Secondly, use your time wisely. Make memories, have fun with people, and enjoy your time, because life's short. Secondly, have proper communication, network with people, and make sure that there's no miscommunication, because that is the key root of major problems. With that, I'd like to thank you for viewing today's episode, and always remember to be positive.